Hi, in this video I'm going to talk you through two more easily confused words, and those two words are even though and even so. So I've heard many learners get a bit stuck here, so here's a bit of information to help you. So these two phrases are often confused by learners because the meaning is very similar. It's not quite the same, but the difference is very small. And actually, in many ways, the pronunciation is similar, but there are some important differences. So in this lesson, I'm going to explain the differences in meaning. I'm going to explain how to use them accurately, and I'm also going to talk you through the pronunciation for both. So let's start with even though. So even though is really a synonym for although and though. There is no difference really between even though, although and though. They are the same. Even though is a bit stronger. So we use even though when we are trying to explain two ideas where the contrast is quite big. So all three of these phrases, although, though, and even though, link two contrasting ideas or facts, but we like to use even though when that difference is bigger. So here's a couple of examples. Even though it was cold and raining heavily, the newspaper boy delivered all his newspapers. Long queues of Harry Potter fans have formed outside the bookshop, even though J.K. Rowling isn't due until tomorrow. So we can see here that even though can be used at the beginning or in the middle of a compound sentence. It's always followed by a clause, so that's basically subject verb. And in both of these example sentences, we've got two ideas that are contrasting or surprising. So this first one, even though it was cold and raining heavily, this happened to me. I used to have a newspaper delivered to my house on a Sunday. And one day in probably January, it was freezing cold and it was raining and raining and raining. And this little boy, he was about 12, was outside my door completely soaking wet in his waterproof gear, delivering his newspapers. So other newspaper boys, they get their parents to drive in their car, but this kid, he was out there doing it himself. So this is a surprise, right? Because you would expect on a cold, wet day people to be at home. And we've got the same thing here. We've got the surprise. It's surprising that there are queues of Harry Potter fans because J.K. Rowling isn't going to be at the bookshop till tomorrow. So basically, when we use this word, we can put it in the middle or at the beginning, and we're really linking two bits of information that contrast each other. Let's look at even so. Now, the difficulty for students is that even so also introduces surprising or contrasting information. So it kind of does a similar job. However, it's not quite a direct synonym of though and although. It means something more like although this is true. So here's a couple more examples. The rain fell and it was cold. Even so, the newspaper boy got on his bike and delivered his newspaper. The Harry Potter stories are not particularly well written, but even so, they are very popular and have made J.K. Rowling extremely wealthy. So in terms of where to use this phrase, even so, we can either have it at the beginning of a sentence or we can have it after a but. in the middle of a longer sentence. But what we can't do is put even so at the beginning on its own. It's not possible. So there is a difference in use there between even though and even so. Now, the reason really why this can't go at the beginning is because of this meaning here, although something is true. So we need to know what the something is if we want to use this phrase. So this first one, the rain fell and it was cold. And here, although this is true, although this was happening, this kiddie got on his bike and delivered his paper. So let's look at the pronunciation differences then. I'm going to read these sentences again, and I want you to focus on the pronunciation for even though and even so, and just listen and see what do you notice. You might like to listen for stress. Stress is always a good thing to listen for. You might like to listen to the way the words join up together. Even though it was cold and raining heavily, the newspaper boy delivered all his newspapers. The rain fell and it was cold. Even so, the newspaper boy got on his bike and delivered his newspapers. So let's just look at the stress first of all. In even though, I've got, oh no, I haven't. Sorry, start again. Even though it was cold and raining heavily. So I have one stress there, but I don't have another one until cold. So the other syllables in this phrase have both got small stresses, even though it was cold. But down here, in even so, it's different. The rain fell and it was cold. Even so, the newspaper boy got on his bike. So I keep my big stress there, but I also add a big stress on so. So the stress pattern, firstly, is different. And I'm going to read them again, and I want you to notice what happens at the boundaries between the words. So what happens in those spaces that I've marked in red? Even though it was cold and raining heavily. The rain fell and it was cold. Even so, the newspaper boy got on his bike. So hopefully you can hear that in the first one, I connect though with the next word. There's no break between though and it. But here, where I've got even so, I have got a break. So even so is kind of separated from the clause that follows it. So the pronunciation in that sense is quite different. Now, if we look at the phonemes, of course, they're very, very similar. The only different phoneme or sound, of course, is there. When we've got a s here and a th there. So the differences are really in the stress and whether the phrase joins or is separated from the next phrase. Let's just listen very quickly to the last two sentences. Long queues of Harry Potter fans have formed outside the bookshop, even though J.K. Rowling isn't due until tomorrow. So again, this, even though, is joined up to J.K. Rowling, oh, that's my phone, because J.K. Rowling is important information. The Harry Potter stories are not particularly well written, but even so, they are very popular and have made J.K. Rowling extremely wealthy. So again, we've got a break there and a stress on the say. So I hope that was helpful for you. I completely get why these two phrases are hard to differentiate for learners because there are so many similarities between them. But I think if you can remember that even though it can be at the beginning or in the middle, whereas even so needs to have the main information before it, and even so kind of stands on its own, but even though it's connected up to the rest of the information. I hope that was helpful. Thanks for watching. Right.